What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row. It is time for another positional week off-season report. Of course, it's the running backs. We've already covered quarterbacks. We've already covered tight ends. Go to the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. Check those out. Spirited discussion about the tight ends, if I will say so myself, Tim. But it's all in good fun.
Those are good. Those are fun.
We embrace debate on this here program, and that's what we do. We have a lot of fun talking about the Buckeyes. I know you all needed 30 minutes of tight end talk. Now you're going to get a nice, long-winded conversation about the running backs. That's the 40-year vet Tim May. Andy Backstrom, as always. This is, as always, again, presented by the fine folks at Buyers Auto, the best place to buy a new or used vehicle in Central Ohio. Tim, Travion Henderson, back healthy, fully cleared after spring practice. Mayan Williams, back healthy, full go, through a lot of spring practice, now onto summer. Those are the top two guys, unquestioned, and they'll lead the way for Ohio State's running backs this year.
Was that a question or was that a declarative sentence you just made right there?
I'm just trying to make the flow of the video happen, Tim. I was
I
just
got you.
hoping you would pick
No,
up.
the reason I'm saying is, the guy that I'm looking forward to seeing come back in full go is Evan Pryor, because they had so many things planned for him. They may not, me and Brian Hartline got into that, what would you call it? Interesting discussion about Evan Pryor back in the spring, because unlike Travion Henderson, they really haven't seen Evan Pryor do much, if anything, on a field in a game and stuff. So, but they were planning on stuff for him last year until he unfortunately got a season-ending injury in August. I'm really fired up about seeing him come back, and of course Dallin Hayden and Chip Trayanum back to being a full-time running back. But to your premise about those two guys, lightning and thunder. And the big debate is which one's lightning, which one's thunder. Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. I think Mayan Williams is thunder because things kind of shake sometimes when he hits on up in there and runs through a few tackles. But he can also outrun you to the edge and skip through some holes and make some people miss. And then, of course, the wiggle that I've been referring to with Travion Henderson since the first time I saw him carry a ball at Ohio State. You hope that's back, because that's what, well, when he did play, that's what was still missing because of that foot injury he had and tried to play on, and really was quite the warrior trying to play on that. The more you learned about it at the end of the year and the surgery it entailed to fix that. If that wiggles back, man, there's no finer. This is funny. We'll say this. This isn't gushing. There's no finer, deeper running back room in the country than Ohio State has got. And Tony Alford, the running backs coach, will second that notion, just like there's no finer or deeper wide receiver room than Ohio State's got. And with Jelani Thurman coming on at tight end, there's no finer deep. No, I'm just joking. That was yesterday. But the bottom line is Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams 100% ready to go against Indiana. Who can trump that?
I don't think anybody could, Andy, and that's why we're talking about this. It's weird. Ohio State's being compared to the other teams in the Big Ten. Patron Allen and Nick Singleton at Penn State, Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum at Michigan. Now Ohio State, Travion Henderson and Maya Williams. I think that conversation is being skewed. People are forgetting what Travion did as a freshman. That should not be forgotten, though. 270 yards against Tulsa 2 years ago. What he did in that Penn State game, just running through tackles and ended up breaking one, I think, for 65 yards for a touchdown to ice that one. Like, the things that he was doing would have this Ohio State running back room at the top of those three. I think if people remembered the health factor of those two guys from last year, Travion and Mayan, just seemed to not be able to get over the injury bug. This could be a really special, not really room. I think the whole room could be, but just that duo can be really special for Ohio State if both of those guys can stay healthy.
Absolutely. I mean, the running backs you mentioned in the Big Ten, there are some great ones. So, but I do think that this duo is right up there with the top of that crop. And Travion Henderson, yeah, it's kind of a shame we didn't get to see what he could do last year, just because usually in the second year, running back can make even more of a jump than what you've seen from their true freshman season if they had one like Travion had. He forced 50 missed tackles as a true freshman, averaged 4.31 yards after contact per carry, and had 34 runs of 10 or more yards. I mean, those stats alone are certainly impressive. And he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. So when you talk about running backs that really fit the NFL mold, Travion Henderson is right near the top of that. If he has the season that he had, like he did when he was a true freshman, he could easily be a late first round or early second round pick in next year's draft. And if it was 10 years ago, he could have been probably a top 10, 15 pick in the draft with another season like that. So that's a premier talent to headline this group. As Tim mentioned, as you mentioned, Spencer, staying healthy is the most important thing, but it's almost, a blessing in disguise. What happened last year with all the injuries is that there was depth that was built through that process. Dallin Hayden came along and had some great performances. The one that comes to mind, of course, is the Maryland game, where if he didn't have a game like that, they might not have gotten out of College Park with a win to keep their CFP chances alive. And then, of course, Chip Trainum coming along late and having a great game against Michigan. And then in the spring, maybe having one of the best springs of any offensive player and really showing that burst that he has in addition to the size.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is I've already made my stance very clear. The top two guys are who they are. Those are the top two, and I don't think anybody's going to unseat them. But the interesting thing is, how does Tony Alford now approach this? Is there a true third back? Is there a rotation? Like, who fills in for who? Is it Dallin Hayden will be the backup to TreVeyon Henderson and Chip will be the backup to Mayan? Is it the other way around? Those four I really have my eye on. Of course, Tim will let you talk about Evan Pryor here later in the video, but like it just interests me who's the number 3 back, because I don't see Chip Trainum or Dallin Hayden overtaking the first two guys in the top 2 of that pecking order. But I could definitely see them fighting for carries in that third back role. And then how does Tony Alford deploy all of these weapons into a single offense? That's another question that we're not going to know until Indiana, and maybe even on down the line. We might not know that until later in the year when they really need all 4 of those guys to compete and be at the top of their game, Tim.
Yeah, and what's Brian Hartline going to have to say about it? And Ryan Day. I mean, that'll be the site. But here's the thing, and Andy touched on it. Actually, he didn't touch on it. He hammered the nail on it. Is Chip Trainum stepped up when they needed somebody last year. Obviously, started the Michigan game or played the lion's share of the Michigan game because they thought that was the back they needed against that defense. Whereas Dallin Hayden, who had that brilliant, in my opinion, true debutante ball against Maryland, was an afterthought in that game. But then both of those guys stepped up against Georgia, along with Mayan Williams. But those 2 guys especially stepped up against Georgia. And it's, I hate to say this because coaches don't agree with this. I think those guys deserve to play, not be considered for playing time. They deserve to get to play based on what they did and based on the fact that both of them looked really good in the spring on occasion. Dallin Hayden looks like he's gained about 30 or 40% physically. Looks like a stronger guy, looks like a bigger guy who's more than ready now than he was this time a year ago when he was just showing up at Ohio State. Looks like he's more than ready for the rigors of a Big Ten schedule, the physical nature of it. And Chip Trainum does too. Chip Trainum looked, he had that dalliance with linebacker, and he gets here and finds out they're only playing 2 linebackers, and by 2, they meant pretty much 2 plus Cody Simon. And so I just think they all deserve to get to play, and that includes Evan Pryor. Evan Pryor was poised to really step up in preseason last year and really make some moves. And they had things at least in mind for using him, especially getting out on the edge, like a Curtis Samuel type back. If you want to draw an analogy of a former Ohio State back, a guy that can really beat you to the edge. And boy, I really envision them having just thinking, if they're thinking anywhere close to what I'm thinking, I'm talking about the coaches, because this is just me, I'd be having a lot of 2-back sets this year because you've got some guys that can give you, in essence, triple option back there, especially if, like I said, we talked about on the quarterback video, if you get these quarterbacks running a little bit, because it looks like Cal McCord and Devin Brown are more than willing to get out there and run a true zone read option on occasion. But you add another running back into that, almost like a veer option look. You've really got something, because you've also got 3 great wide receivers out there on the edges. So I'm really curious to see 2 or 3 great wide receivers and or a tight end. So I'm really curious to see how they deploy this year and try to use all of these weapons that, in my opinion, are all potent.
Yeah, but that's where this great conundrum comes in is okay, if you want a second running back on the field, one of your three receivers has to come off the field, or one of your tight ends has to come off the field. And where is the balance in doing that? Do you want one of your three top receivers, potential top three of the top 15, 20 receivers in the country? Do you want one of them on the sideline in favor of a running back? Do you want Cade Stover, who had 400 yards last year, off the field in favor of a second running back? And, the notion that all these guys deserve to play, I agree. They all deserve to play. That doesn't mean that they all can play, though. A lot of wide receivers, hold on, Tim, I'll get to you, deserve to play, but that doesn't mean that they all can play. It's not a thing that can happen. There's only so many snaps in a game. Ohio State scores quickly too. Like it can't happen. And so Dallin Hayden deserves some carries. He probably deserves more carries than he's going to get. Chip Trayanum probably deserves more carries than he's going to get. But guess what? TreVeyon Henderson is a potential first-round pick, and you can only put him on the sideline so often before you realize, hey, this guy needs the ball more. If he returns to the freshman form, he's going to demand, not like demand as in like vocally, but like just in his play, demand the ball more than those guys are on the field. Tim, go ahead.
How many complete games has TreVeyon Henderson played at The Ohio State University? I'm trying to think.
That's
Number
not my
one.
point but that's not my point at all
Well,
here.
no, but you're talking about I'm not arguing with you. You're talking about potential. I'm talking about scaring the bejeebers out of a defense when you deploy May and Williams and TreVeyon Henderson in the same backfield with Callum McCord, and then you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka and Cade Stover on the field. Cade Stover can split out. He can line up tight like a real tight end. My point is, you further enhance the chances for Marvin Harrison Jr. to gain, or Emeka Egbuka to gain, ideal coverage situations when you establish that you're willing to put two big-time running backs on the field, both of whom, by the way, can catch the ball out of the backfield, as can Evan Pryor, and as can Dallin Hayden. That's the only the point I was making is you make this offense even scarier, is the point. You don't do it every play, every down of every game, but you show these things out there 10, 15 times a game. And I'm telling you, it changes your offense into an even better, scarier monster.
Andy, we'll get back to running backs. Tim and I, nice little discussion there, Tim, on the scheme. Maybe we'll have to just have a scheme show and talk about what maybe Ohio State could deploy at the end of these offensive position weeks. That's a good idea, but we'll table it for now. Andy, Chip Trayanum, I know you're really high on after watching him this spring. Everybody is, I think, after the spring game performance, but just the ability for Chip to get on the edge, the ability for him to run people over, he can do just about everything you want. I don't know if he's better than TreVeyon Henderson as far as hitting the gap. I don't know if he's better than May and Williams running people over, but he's really close to both of them at doing it. And he's the kind of guy that you want in your backfield. You'd rather have him in your backfield than having your defense trying to tackle him. Am I correct?
Yeah, and he's fresh legs. So if you bring him out in the third quarter or to start a drive in the fourth quarter and a defense is already really gassed, I think that's the perfect time to use him to help close out a game. If you have a couple score lead, I think that's when we might see Chip. I think he can really bulldoze over people. He can also break one loose and then in a late game situation like that. So I do think we'll see him play. I don't think he'll be getting any more than, like 6, 7, maybe 8 carries a game. And that could be the high end of that range. But I still think he'll have an impact. And I think there'll be games where he has somewhat of a hot hand. And maybe in some of these early season games where things get out of hand quickly and Ohio State has a big lead, he could have some good stat lines and performances. And same goes for Dallin Hayden. The other running back / wide receiver that we haven't mentioned that, Tim mentioned Curtis Samuel. Well, I think of someone like Xavier Johnson. I know they still want to use him in the backfield a little bit. I don't know where he comes in now, because if you look at the team last year, he's the 4th leading rusher. He actually had more rushing yards than Chip last year. And, how are they going to use him this year? It's a good problem to have. I think he does a lot. And the other thing that we were talking about earlier is how are they going to throw to the running backs? That's something that was in this offense traditionally. Wasn't last year, really. No running back had more than 5 catches. So are they going to get back to that screen game? We saw a lot with J.K. Dobbins. We saw a lot with TreVeyon Henderson. Are they going to return to that? That's another way to get the running backs involved. So I'm watching for that as we go into the summer.
Yeah, and the interesting thing these five, we're talking about 5 running backs, and none of them are the same guy. None of them is a duplicate of the other guy. I mean, the chess pieces that that this offense has to work with just in the running back realm is extremely interesting to me. And I know we're not talking about scheme, but like I'm watching, for example, Dallin Hayden, and I even asked him about it in one of those interview opportunities during the spring. You could see him running with more patience. You could see him running with more of an idea of, to a certain extent, not only what was going on in front of him, you can see that improvement, but also the idea that if you snuggle up behind a big offensive lineman, you're going to at least get as far as he does, before you have to make your break, before you have to declare yourself. And that's just in high school, most of these guys take a toss or whatever and just go, and whatever happens in front of them happens in front of them. In college, of course, the playing, the athletic ability is equal to a certain extent. And when you start learning the tricks of the trade that can get you those 2, 4, 8 extra steps, sometimes even before you get hit, it's quite the achievement. And that's what I like about Dallin Hayden, man. I am really curious because I think it's a conundrum to a certain extent for Tony Alford, because all of these guys have produced. I think you were talking about a while ago, Andy, about what Dallin Hayden did against Maryland, and Chip Trainum at least stepping up for them against Michigan. Didn't have a great day, but and then Xavier Johnson, throwing him into the mix. I mean, he's just your utility, your Swiss Army knife kind of back. It's real. You're not going to keep any of these guys happy, in my opinion. Maybe one. It might be Travion Henderson, but doesn't May and Williams deserve, some attention from the standpoint of keeping him happy too? So, like you said, if you get 4 or 5 or 8 totes a game, you're probably getting the lion's share, at least what they consider to be the lion's share for those games. And it's going to be curious how they keep a Dallin Hayden fresh, but also keep him on the beam. And I think he's a guy who really improved from the first time you saw him in practice last August until the last practice we saw in the spring.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Tim. Again, I'll say it again, and it might be the theme of this show, maybe this entire week, is just because a guy deserves carries doesn't mean in this offense he's going to get them. Xavier Johnson probably deserves more catches than he's going to get. Carnell Tate probably deserves more playing time than he's going to get. It's just what this offense is. Like, there's just too many guys, and it's a great problem for Ohio State to have. It's still a problem, though. And I don't mean to continue to push back on you, Tim, at all, but for me, Evan Pryor, since we've seen Evan Pryor on the field, since he was last healthy, Dallin Hayden has gotten a lot better. Chip Trainum has proven he can get 85 yards against a very, very, very good Michigan defense. Travion Henderson is still Travion Henderson, and May and Williams has gotten better. So for me to sit here in May or June and talk about Evan Pryor as a playmaker, I'm not ready to do that yet. I haven't seen him on the field other than in the spring game.
You and Brian Hartline. Go ahead now.
I'm not ready to do that because I would take Travion Henderson, May and Williams, Chip Trainum, and Dallin Hayden right now over him because I just haven't seen it. I've heard about it in practice, but I haven't seen it, Andy. And so you just wonder where.
Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to say to you. I'm not saying that they're going to start Evan Pryor. What I'm just saying, based on him coming out of the spring a year ago, what he showed, the talk that was going on about him within the coaching ranks going into preseason camp, and even the way he started preseason camp, they really liked what he was going to bring from a diversity standpoint to that offense. And then it all gets obliterated because he gets hurt. He suffers a season-ending knee injury and he gets hurt. But I mean, Travion Henderson, we didn't see him anywhere close to 100% last year. And we're talking about him like he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. And I really think he possibly could be, but I mean, not based on last year. Huh?
Tim?
What?
You watched the 1,200 yards as a freshman?
I said that was 2 years ago. I said based on last year and what he was able to contribute because of injury. I mean, so it's, to me, when you're talking about one, you can talk about the other in the same vein. I'm not saying what they're actually going to do. I'm just saying I truly believe Evan Pryor is a talent and is a threat when he's on the field. How do you deal with that? How do you get them? How do you get them all carries? How do you get them all involved in the offenses? Is basically what we're talking about.
Andy, I just side on the fact that, as freshmen, Travion Henderson was able to work his way on the field, had 1,200 yards, almost has 2,000 career rushing yards. Evan Pryor, I think, has a little bit near 100. And so I've seen that commodity.
You're not being fair here, Spencer.
Oh,
I'm talking about.
Understand the argument.
My point is, I know what you're saying. I'm not advocating. I'm just saying Evan Pryor is definitely in the mix if, in fact, he's healthy in August to be a big part of this offense. Not a major part, who knows? But that's all I'm saying, because Travion Henderson was going to be the guy this time a year ago, and of course suffered injuries, which kept him out of how many games? He didn't even play against Georgia. He had his surgery. So everything we're talking about is speculation.
Andy, what do you think? Because it just doesn't look like there's enough room for all 5 of these guys right now.
Well, this is what they sign up for. They know the situation. I mean, you talk about keeping guys happy. Like, they understand this is what they're getting into. They bet on themselves. They all think they are the best, and that's for a good reason. They're all talented. They got here for a reason, and they're going to compete. And yes, Tim, like, I just watched the 2022 spring game as I was watching some Devin Brown stuff, and I saw a lot of Evan Pryor, and he definitely has talent. And I'm curious to see how he builds off of that. I definitely think he's in a conversation. But right now, I also see where Spencer's coming from. So there's both sides of it. I think he's certainly talented. They all are. That's why they all believe they're the best. That's why they're here. But the one thing I will say, a takeaway from this group, is that because they're so deep and because they can be so good, this can really help the offensive line. I've heard from offensive linemen before, if you can get going on the ground game, get moving, push defenders back, and really start a game like that, it can make pass protection a lot easier. You get in a rhythm. These running backs can help them in that department. I think that's something that's a little bit overlooked. This offensive line needs help. It might need help in personnel groupings. Maybe that's more 12 personnel. Maybe that's more extra tight ends. I don't know. But the running backs can help too. And I think that's why it's so important this group is so deep.
Yeah. And what did we see in the spring, man? When they just lined up and ran the ball, there were a couple of scrimmages where Dallin Hayden and Chip Traynham, they looked like Heisman candidates. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, that's going off the deep end. But the point is, with a young offensive line, the best thing you can do sometimes is just line up and go, you're blocking that guy, you're blocking that guy. If this guy jumps in the gap, you're blocking that guy, and keep it as simple as possible and run the ball down somebody's throat. I know Ryan Day wants to get to that. He's gotten to it a little bit the last couple of years, but he wants to get to that knock people off the ball syndrome for this offense, because it just opens up all kinds of possibilities for you in the passing game and everywhere else. I mean, just make them. That's why I was talking a while ago, we'll talk about scheme, as Spencer said later, but you're jumping in a 2-back with a quarterback who's willing to run. Oh my goodness, that can do so much for this offense. How many times did I advocate for CJ Stroud just to run the ball 3 times a game just to show he'll do it? Finally against Georgia, he does it. It changed everything. And that's what I think. That's a big push I'm seeing coming out of last year, that they realized that attacking with the passing game down the field and attacking straight ahead with their running game. By straight ahead, I mean, you still got the wrinkles, et cetera, but with their running game, it just changed how that defense has to play you, because they got to respect you. And they've got running backs, all of whom can add to that. But if you put an Evan Pryor back there with a Travion Henderson, good luck, defense.
That's the fun in this running back discussion, Tim, is that there are so many different opinions. Obviously, Ryan Day, Corey Dennis, Tony Alford, Justin Fry, Brian Hartline, nobody agrees. And that's the fun in it, is they get to do it 365 days a year, discussing how to utilize all of these running backs, all of this talent on the offensive side of the ball. That's also what we do, though. I don't know if you know this. We cover Ohio State 365 days a year at LettermenRow.com. Go there right now and get a hell of a deal from the folks at On3. Come join Lettermen Row. Come join the Lettermen Lounge message board. Hit the little bell down below, notifications for all of our beautiful videos. You can see all of our faces every week as we discuss the Buckeyes. Again, 365 days a year. Andy Backstrom, Tim May, the 40-year veteran. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the latest offseason report presented by Buyers Auto. We will see you back next week for Wide Receivers Week.